And welcome to Turnkey to Your Retirement. My name is Cynthia DeFazio, and I'm joined today by Paul Keough. He is the CEO of Keough Wealth Management. Paul, how are you today?
I'm still great. How are you doing still?
I am doing great as well. Thank you so much for asking. It's
Good.
a pleasure to be with you today.
Yeah,
I've
thanks.
loved getting to know you, obviously, over the phone. We've spoken on the phone several times, and we had our Zoom meeting, so this is such a pleasure to have you in the studio, and so thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks you. Well, I'm so excited for the show because I know we have a very important topic to talk about, which is planning for retirement.
Yes.
And so often people go into their retirement years, Paul, as you know, without having a plan, but basically just grabbing those statements out of the mail.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit first about the importance of a retirement plan.
Yeah, talk about grabbing statements out of the mail. My mother told me to go get a metal box. That's how my career started. And so I went to get the metal box from my parents' room where I knew it always was. And I brought it back to her. Now, as I was bringing it back to her, I heard the sound of a motorcycle driving away. That was my father leaving my mother. And on the back of that motorcycle was a nurse. And they took off. And my mom made jokes about it. She was in good spirits. But that box was where my dad kept all the bills you just mentioned. All the papers and all the bills were in that box. So I opened up that box, and my mom was doing better than I was at this point, and she was telling jokes. And so I pull out these bills and put them on the table, and the first thing we had to do was start paying bills. She'd never paid bills.
Wow.
So I sat there and started paying bills for my mom, and meanwhile she told jokes. And the first thing we had to do was figure out what now, how is she going to pay the bills today?
Yeah.
And then what's the future going to look like without Dad? And how will she pay bills in the future? What's her income going to be in the future? And how will she retire?
Yeah.
And so those were the puzzles that really started my career, and that was 30 years ago. And I tried my best, but I was learning, and I was 21 years old at the time, so I did the best I could with what she was handing me, and learned along the way. And now I get to live vicariously through helping other people get to retirement and get into retirement without making mistakes.
Well, I was hoping you were going to tell me you grabbed that metal box since it was filled with bills and tied it to the back of your dad's motorcycle.
Here, take it with you.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping you were going to tell me.
That's right. Well, there was good news later. He did apologize, and he eventually did support us, and he did come back to being a person who believes in God, and he did leave the nurse, and so there is a good ending to that. But at the same time, my mom became a more educated person.
Yeah.
She became good at finance. She could deal with the box that was left behind. And she did a great job of running the household. And she became very wise about finance. And so I had a great mentor in my mom. And more than anything, just you have such a great laugh. My mom had such a good sense of humor about the whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, you wouldn't think you'd come out of that with a sense of humor, but she really did. She was okay with it.
And she probably wanted to be the bright light for you. Like, you know what, it's going to be okay, we're going to be okay, and this is just the way life's going to be from this point forward as we navigate through.
And not just me, I've got 13 brothers and sisters.
Wow.
So I'm the 9th of 13.
That's incredible.
So she took care of all of us, and my father did eventually start supporting us again. But she really was the primary financier at that point and for the rest of her life.
Wow. Let's talk a little bit about your experience on Wall Street.
Sure.
Because I know that kind of helped form to where you are today. So let's go back a little bit in time and talk about that. Yeah,
going to Wall Street was a trip. It was, first I didn't expect it. I was completing my doctorate at Northwestern, and I was approached by 3 groups. I was approached by the FBI, the military, and Wall Street. And honestly, at that time, I had just come back to Jesus, sort of, in my senior year completing my doctorate. And I thought I would probably go to the military or the FBI. And there's no way I'm going to Wall Street. Because these guys kept coming to me, and they were taking me out and buying me suits and trying to convince me to go and talking about the fee they would get placing me on Wall Street. I thought, well, I could see I was good for them, but I wasn't sure why I would do it. Until I finally met El Rauch, and he convinced me, no, we really need people who are ethical. We need people who can explain investments to individuals in real common terms and can make sense of it for people. And he convinced me to go to Wall Street, and it was quite an experience. You know, the movies are always portraying Wall Street as, you know, vicious people who are just dog eat dog, but that really wasn't what I found. I found very ethical people, hardworking people, If someone was misbehaving, like a Bernie Madoff, they got caught.
Sure.
Eventually, they would get caught. And so I found there were really good people doing what was right for the most part, most of them, and trying to help people. But I was actually on the institutional side. And what that means is that I didn't get to help families and small businesses. I had to help big banks. I had to help broker-dealers, mutual funds, hedge funds of the world. And so I was making billionaires richer, really, is what I was doing. And it just didn't feel that gratifying to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I did make them richer, but I'd really rather make a dramatic difference in the average family's life.
Sure.
And I couldn't do that. In fact, they had something called the Chinese wall, and we'd have sort of what we call breakthrough calls. Somebody would try to call and say, hey, I want to talk to that Keough guy about biotech. And they would stop the call because it was not a bank and it was not a hedge fund or a mutual fund.
Oh my
So I was
gosh.
institutional only. I wasn't allowed on the retail side, and those people were not permitted to talk to me.
Oh.
And so I thought the very people I want to help, hardworking people just like my mom, I couldn't help. And so I found it frustrating, and at a certain point I promised my wife I would leave. And it was tempting to stay because of the money involved, and you can always earn more. And nobody believed I would leave, actually.
Yeah.
And I did it. I kept the promise to God and to my wife and to my pastor, and I did leave.
Wow.
And I decided I wanted to help families and small businesses, and lasted about a decade on Wall Street. And I was glad that I left. I think being on the retail side, helping families is way more rewarding. Not just for me, but for the families,
Oh,
for those
sure.
families and small businesses. You can make such a difference.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of knowledge from Wall Street goes a long ways.
Sure.
So,
So when you were working on Wall Street, were you living in the city itself?
yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Wall Street used to be Wall Street. You'd have to go to New York City and live on Old Wall Street. And I actually did have an address there when I went to Wall Street. And so I was on literal Wall Street. In fact, when the protests happened in 2008, I pointed at the TV and said, Lisa, that's my office. She was like, I know. There was someone throwing stuff at windows.
Oh my gosh.
And you could see the bowl on the street on Wall Street, and it was Old Wall Street, and they were throwing at the window I used to work in.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, I'm glad I left.
Yeah.
That was a good move,
Yeah,
getting out of
best
there.
decision ever.
That's right, yeah. So, I think that Wall Street changed, though, and now you can be on virtual Wall Street.
Okay.
So when I was with Wells Fargo, I was at their headquarters in San Francisco. When I was with Morgan Stanley, I was in the Chicago office of Morgan Stanley. So you can actually be in anywhere now and be on Wall Street, sort of
Okay.
technically, yeah.
But definitely the driving force has been your passion for helping others retire with confidence and retire comfortably. So from that point, was that the birth of your own company?
It really was. When I left, there were certain agreements I had signed, so I had to wait a little bit and consult. But then I built my own firm, and it was great helping people who they did really well at their career or they did really well with their business, but simply hadn't looked at their retirement in any serious way.
Okay.
They were just going to kind of do it. And most people think that they can just sort of plan their retirement.
Yeah.
But
On their own.
yeah, it's pretty hard to do.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to do. And you can only do
Yeah.
it once. You can only retire once.
I know.
And so you can only really plan it once. And when I saw that most people, almost 80% of people were doing it on their own with no help, I was just stunned. I thought, that can't be right. My mom trying to do the bills on her own, at least at first, was just not going to happen. She needed help.
Sure.
And I needed her. And then since then, I think I've lived vicariously through all the families and businesses that, with real good effort and hard work, got to the point they were at. They'd saved $250,000 or more,
Yeah.
and they didn't know what to do with it or how they were going to turn that into income in retirement without going broke.
Yeah.
And I think we need so many people in this field, not just
Yeah.
me, but we need a lot of people to do this.
Sure.
To help so many who are in need of advice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, this is the perfect time for us to go ahead and open up the phone lines to the viewers at home. Would you agree?
Oh, sure.
Okay. To the viewers at home, the number on your screen to call is 855-222-2557. If you have questions about how to retire comfortably and with confidence, Paul is offering you a complimentary consultation. This offer is available to the first 10 callers only today. Remember, you only retire once, and so you want to get it right. The number to call is 855-222-2557. We're going to have a lot more when we come back from this very short commercial break, so please stay tuned. We'll be back momentarily.
How confident are you in your current financial plan? Do you know with certainty how the recent market volatility will affect your future hopes and dreams? How much are you paying in taxes? And how much are you losing to unnecessary high fees? You didn't work to save this money so that you could spend your time worried in retirement. Now is the time to take charge of your finances so you can feel confident about your future. Call in during the next 30 minutes of today's show only to set up an absolutely complimentary, no obligation, full-blown financial review that will result in your own customized written plan. This is a $999 value that we're giving away complimentary to the first 10 people who respond. We'll start with a full-blown analysis of what you already have by running a report to untangle how much you are currently paying in fees, how you're allocated for risk, and what it's costing to work with your current advisor. Next, we'll identify your goals. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Where do you want to go, and who do you hope to go there with? Is your current financial plan set up to get you there without mishap? Let's design a roadmap to create a financial plan you can follow with confidence. Get the piece that so many people are missing from their retirement. Find out how having a written plan can make a difference to your retirement dreams. Call now to schedule your complimentary, no obligation, full-blown financial review today.
And welcome back to Turnkey to Your Retirement. My name is Cynthia DeFazio, and I'm joined today by Paul Keough. He is the CEO of Keough Wealth Management. Paul, a great first segment that we had, obviously letting the viewers get to know you on a more personal level. So let me ask you, when you're helping someone retire comfortably with a retirement plan, if you will, how is your strategy different from other people in the field?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it took all these years to get the strategy together that we now use. And we call it the Tax Efficient Retirement Income Plan, or TARP. And I know it sounds like maybe one of the colors of an alert or something, like, but it's really a plan. And it's because I recognized those were the two main problems that weren't really being solved fully, is being tax efficient and having enough income, because you can have too much income. And I think that's the story that's often missed, is that income is often fixed in retirement. Once you get Social Security and you've turned that puppy on, you can't turn it off. If you have a pension, if you're lucky enough of the 5% of people who have a pension, once you turn on that defined benefit, you can't turn it off. You've turned the spigot on.
That makes sense.
And once you have your retirement accounts, those that are pre-tax, so the government wants that tax money, once you have to RMD, or required minimal distribution at age 72, once you turn that on, you can't turn it off. So what that means is you have potentially up to 3 sources of income that go on and can't be shut off. Well, if they can't be shut off and you turn them on, and they're turned on irreversibly, and you end up in a tax bracket you didn't want to be in, you're stuck.
Yeah.
And that's the story I think that's often missed. And so that's the side of the equation we've decided to really try to help people with, is not overpaying tax for the rest of their lives.
Sure, sure. Is that something that people are very concerned about right now, Paul? Taxes today and in the future?
You know, I think they are, but they should be more concerned. And I think one of the reasons is that when we're working, we're used to pre-tax deductions. So we're plugging along on a train at a certain speed, and we're just used to whatever we're facing. And we don't think, well, how is that train going to look different when I stop in a depot called retirement?
Yeah.
And I get on a boat, or I get on an airplane somewhere else. How's that going to be different?
Sure.
And I don't think that everyone plans forward, what are those taxes going to be? How are we going to prevent going into the next tax bracket with income?
Sure.
I think it's underplayed on the tax planning side. And so I wish people would worry more about it, and that's what we address, is trying not to overpay.
Sure. Paul, what are the different components of a well-designed retirement plan?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I left Wall Street, I ran into a field that really intrigued me. It's called behavioral finance.
Okay.
And have you heard of behavioral finance?
When we talked on the phone.
Just recently, okay.
Yeah, and I love this concept.
Yeah, it's a great concept. Now, when I when I first approached behavioral finance, not too many people were aware of it. And I still think there aren't too many who are aware of it. But most people get the idea that when you make a decision, even about money, at least half of that decision is an emotional decision.
Sure.
Right? It's not just, well, I should do it and it's logical. That's not how we live. We're human beings. We don't think that way about other parts of our lives. So why would we think that way about finance?
Sure.
So there are emotions involved. And so I started incorporating behavioral finance into our planning practice.
Okay.
And we now have 20 areas that we cover when it comes to planning. And it includes some areas that you would expect, like tax planning and legal planning, investment planning, but some areas that are less commonly put together in a plan, but in my opinion are more important than just the logical side. And that includes things like spiritual planning, marriage planning, legacy planning. And these are areas that are underappreciated in the field, but people really need them.
Sure.
People need these areas covered because it can change a decision entirely.
Yeah.
To give an example, I had a client who, whenever I talked to him about what he wanted to do with his money, he would say, I want to take risk, I want to be in stocks, I want high return. But everything else he talked about didn't match that at all. He had a special needs son, and his special needs son was a spendthrift, an irresponsible spender.
Okay, okay.
And so he was very concerned about this.
Yeah.
And he expressed that to me, and I said to him, well, you know, that doesn't match these other things you're saying where you're just going to grow your money in stocks, and then you're just going to hand it to him. It just doesn't match what you're telling me matters to you in the future.
Sure.
It matters to your son. So much better for him was something that was a special needs trust, and combined with that, investments that would only hand a little bit of money to him at a time. So he
Very
wouldn't
good.
go out and buy a Lamborghini and smash into a bridge.
Yeah.
Which I think was a real risk in
Well,
this
yeah,
case.
I'm just thinking that's really smart planning.
Yeah.
So it's taking it a step beyond what typical planners sometimes might look at. You're looking at the entire picture. What's important to that client that's in front of you? What is their family situation like? What is their life like?
Yeah, it shocked me. I mean, in our culture, for whatever reason, Cynthia, by the time you talk about money with someone, you tell them everything because it's so secretive. For our salary, our investments, they're not usually talked about at a party. You know, that's the last thing we talk about, really.
It's true.
We keep it, close to the sleeve. And so, if that's the case, then when people talked about all these other things, their marriage life, their personal life, personal problems they were facing with relatives, I was sitting there kind of scratching my head, and I was thinking, do I have some moral obligation to do something with this information? Should I be, should I be writing it down? And then when I'm writing it down, as long as they don't feel embarrassed that I'm writing it down, say, is it okay if I write this down, what you're describing? Sure. And I'm writing it all down. And then I'm reflecting on it in prayer and thought and trying to figure out, well, what do I do with it? What are they expecting me to do with this information? And behavioral finance was a one-to-one match with that problem. So as soon as I opened the field of behavioral finance, I realized here's the answer. The answer is to figure out emotionally what money means to somebody, what they want money to do for them, and when they can't use it anymore, what should happen to that money. Those are emotional decisions.
Sure.
They really have nothing to do with finance or accounting. And so it opened a whole world. It wasn't real popular when I started using it. I even got laughed at for using it sometimes. But today it's become very popular again. And the founder won the Nobel Prize 2 years ago.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So.
Well, Paul, this is the perfect time for us to reopen up the phone lines to the viewers at home. Would you agree?
Sure.
Okay. To the viewers at home, the number on your screen is 855-222-2557. If you have questions about how to retire comfortably and with peace of mind, Paul is offering you a complimentary consultation. This offer is to the first 10 callers only today. You deserve to retire with peace of mind and with comfort in your retirement years. You've worked so hard to get to this point in your life. The number to call is 855-222-2557. Again, this is open to the first 10 callers only, completely complimentary. We'll be right back after this very short commercial break.
As a good saver, you've been putting away money during your working years. Studies find that the biggest fear of retirees is running out of money. Market volatility isn't just the downward movement of stock prices, it's the size and frequency of change. The more dramatic the ups and downs, the higher the volatility. This can put savers who are newly retired or a few years away from being retired at greater risk. Today's generation of retirees is not receiving traditional pensions as our parents or grandparents did. Instead, we have retirement accounts such as 401ks or 403bs. These accounts typically expose your money to market risk. The last thing you want right before retirement is to lose a portion of the money you need for income. But how do you turn these accounts into a retirement income? Is it safe to keep all your retirement money sitting in the stock market? The last thing you want is to lose a portion of the money you need for income due to market loss. By working with a financial professional, you can learn how to turn a portion of your savings into an income stream for life and income for the life of your spouse if you're married. We all have moments in our lives when we wish we had taken action sooner. Don't let procrastination reign on your retirement parade. Act now before it's too late. Please call our office to set up your no-cost, no-obligation retirement income review today.
And welcome back to Turnkey to Your Retirement. My name is Cynthia DeFazio, and I'm joined today by Paul Keough. He is the CEO of Keough Wealth Management. Paul, a great show that we're having today, and obviously talking about the importance of planning properly for retirement. I have to ask you, what are some common pitfalls that you see with people that are right on the cusp of retirement?
Yeah, real common. First, I see clients that they think they're ready. And they think they're ready because they've done everything right themselves, as far as they know. You know, they've worked hard, they've built up a career, they've built a name for themselves, they've saved, and you know, based on that, there's some confidence there that we're going to retire okay. But they haven't tested it. They haven't really had someone look at that and try to pull it apart. You know, so we try to treat our clients like friends when they come in.
Yeah.
You know, and when they come in, we want to make sure that they're comfortable and that we're addressing all their concerns and asking good questions. But very much like a doctor's office, the doctor's going to ask general questions, and then when they see a sign of something and maybe a couple symptoms, the doctor's going to order some tests, like an X-ray, or if the X-ray comes out with a spot on it, they might get an MRI or do further testing. And so in that sense, we do some risk assessment testing, we do some portfolio analysis to take a look in a more detailed way, what are they really facing? One of the most surprising clients that we have is a neighbor of mine. And this is a neighbor I never would have thought would become a client. We've been very blessed. We don't have to have family or friends as clients. We just give them free advice. And this neighbor has done all kinds of great things with our family. The wife has taken our daughters to tea parties, and the husband's gone fishing with my sons and I. So they're just wonderful neighbors, and they're both professionals, and I never worried about them financially. You know, I don't even get into it with them. But they said, Paul, would you just take a look? And they came to me with quite a bit of confidence that they were ready to retire, and they were 61 and 62. And so I thought, yeah, they probably are, given the you know, everything they've told me anyway. Everything from the outside looked great. But when I dug down and looked at their numbers, I was disappointed to find that they were taking way too much risk. That's a real common pitfall. They were not planning for income at all. They hadn't even considered what their taxes would look like. And they really hadn't considered what would happen to their family and everyone else they cared about, causes they cared about, their church. They hadn't looked at any of those things. So I had to go back rather humble and carefully
I know.
and try to explain that there were some problems. Starting with, you know, taking too much risk. I think when you're on the train of work and you're just working and you're contributing to a retirement plan like a 401k or 403b plan, you're just contributing the money and hopefully there's some match, and you just keep going, and you're told to just keep doing it. You know, that you should do this forever because it's growing, and even if there's a recession and you see some pullback in your growth, it'll recover. You've got time, so it'll recover. So they had a huge portion of their assets were retirement accounts. And those retirement accounts were completely at risk, like 100% risk.
Wow.
And I don't think they understood that in retirement, you have to draw down from that amount all the time. Every month or 2 weeks, whatever you feel comfortable with, you're drawing down income to cover your expenses. And as you're drawing down money, you're preventing that portfolio from recovering if it just went through a recession. So if a portfolio just drops significantly in value and you're trying to have it recover, but you're drawing money out, you're preventing it from recovering because you need that money.
Wow.
And so they just didn't realize how much risk they were taking.
And I'm sure you see that quite a bit with people that are coming in that are meeting with you for the first time, and they may not know why they have certain investments. Perhaps someone told them they should invest in it, so they listen to that person. And then when you're taking a look, and it's almost like a portfolio x-ray, if you will, then you're able to determine, you know what, you're in a totally different bracket than what you realize with risk.
Yeah, that's right. And it's not their fault. I mean, they're being told the same thing by the 401k and pension managers. We do that too. We do pension management. So I get it. I know why they're being told that.
Sure.
But retirement is the biggest financial change of a person's life.
Sure.
It's a major change. And to think it would be the same is surprising. I mean, when people go from being single to married, to think it's going to be the same is definitely a mistake to go into a marriage thinking, oh, this will be the same as when I was single.
Exactly.
That might not last very long.
That is very true.
Or, you know, if you change jobs or change careers, to think, well, it'll be just like it was at the old job or just like it was at the old career. It just doesn't make any sense. So when it comes to retirement, it's not just how much risk someone's taking, but how are they going to have income?
Yeah.
So on the income side, we see lots of mistakes. On the tax side, we see a lot of mistakes that we can get into in more detail. But I think that overall, people need a plan, and they need to at least see someone who is a fiduciary, who puts their interest first, and is compliant and regulatory, so that they have something to lean on that's not just the same opinion they've been listening to while they worked.
Paul, thank you for an amazing show. I look forward to being with you again next week. To the viewers at home, thank you so much for watching. Again, the number is 855-222-2557. Be safe, be happy, be blessed, and we look forward to seeing you back again next week.